Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something really special. We're unpacking a deeply poetic, honestly profoundly moving transcript from a channel called God's Message Now. It's titled, Something in You Already Knows This Door is Open. And let me tell you, this is a fascinating spiritual text because it completely upends all those traditional ideas we have about guilt, divine expectation, and what it actually means to connect with the divine. If you've ever felt like you're just standing outside a locked door, waiting for permission to enter, or feeling like you got to perfect yourself before you're worthy of being heard, well, we're going to break down exactly how this source radically redefines that entire experience. Let's dive right in.
So, the source doesn't kick off with grand theological declarations or super complex doctrines. Actually, it starts right here, with this incredibly simple but deeply disruptive question. How are you? Now, what's really interesting here is how the text uses this question to literally stop the listener dead in their tracks. It's totally designed to bypass all our rehearsed defenses and those polished prayers we all have lined up. The text argues that the divine figure isn't asking this to, gather information because, as the source points out, they already know. They're asking because the very act of answering honestly forces you to cross a psychological and spiritual threshold. And it's a threshold that absolutely no one else can cross for you.
And that unfiltered honesty? That is exactly how the source redefines the knock. The absolutely crucial point here is that knocking, according to this text, is not about begging, it's not some desperate plea, and it is certainly not about putting on a performance to prove you're somehow worthy of entry. The transcript radically redefines it as simply giving an unfiltered, honest answer to that opening question. The text essentially tells the listener that your slow breath, your raw silence, or even just your unpolished exhaustion, that is the knock. The door opens not for your performance, but for your vulnerability.
This builds into a really stark comparison, which is honestly the heart of the source's argument. It contrasts what we might call the God of performance with the God of honesty. The text points out that so many people have been taught to believe in this sort of transactional figure, right? Someone who keeps a ledger of mistakes, where every single failure adds rust to the hinges, making the door heavier and heavier until it just locks permanently. But the source actively dismantles this idea. It presents a God of honesty who doesn't keep account of errors, who forgives instantly, and who actually values your desire to change way more than your past mistakes. The door, according to the text, isn't stuck at all. It's literally already wide open.
What's super fascinating here is that the text doesn't just stay up in the clouds in the abstract, it gives literal physical instructions. The source guides you to take very specific physical actions to break that cycle of shame and hiding. First, it tells you to breathe in and out slowly as your first honest answer. Then it tells you to stop staring at the floor, which it describes as basically staring at your own shame. And finally, it asks you to tilt your head up toward the open sky. It's illustrating that a change in spiritual posture actually starts with a change in physical posture. I mean, you can't accept an open door if you're physically curled up in fear, right? This aligns perfectly with a core quote straight from the text. "I did not come here to be impressed by you. I came here to be answered by you." Wow. The text is shifting the entire focus away from achieving some kind of spiritual perfection. You do not have to fix yourself before you approach. The divine figure isn't waiting for a polished, perfect presentation. They're waiting for genuine connection. Your honesty is literally the only prerequisite for access.
Moving into the next major theme of the text, we're looking at redefining the wait and the concept of divine timing.
Because, let's be real, even if you understand the door is open, what happens when things still feel totally stagnant? The source directly addresses that very human agony of unanswered prayers with this profound statement. Stillness is not rejection. According to the transcript, a super common human habit is to knock, and then, when the door doesn't swing wide open on our exact schedule, we immediately assume we're the problem. We decide that the silence means we prayed wrong, we knocked wrong, or that we just aren't worthy. The text strongly urges the listener to stop reading a seemingly closed entrance as a final verdict on their worth. Delayed answers are simply a matter of divine timing, not a rejection.
So, why exactly isn't the wait a punishment? Well, the transcript breaks this down beautifully to comfort anyone who's currently in that waiting period. First off, the timing is divine, not human. Second, promises do not arrive late. They arrive right on time for those who know how to wait with faith. Third, if something hasn't shown up in the exact shape you pictured, the text promises that better things are actually being prepared behind the scenes. And finally, provision sometimes arrives in completely unexpected, simple forms. The text notes that people often miss their blessings because they were waiting for this noisy, grand entrance, while the divine often chooses the humble and the quiet things to grow into something immense.
Next up, we're diving into overcoming giants and defeating internalized shame.
When exploring those massive psychological barriers that keep people frozen right on the threshold, the source offers this incredibly powerful thought. The mistakes you keep dragging back into the room with you, I have already thrown to the bottom of the sea.
It uses this deeply comforting imagery to emphasize absolute, total forgiveness. It points out the sheer futility of holding on to old guilt, noting that when you accuse yourself, you're literally carrying around something that no longer belongs to you. You're winding yourself up and wounding yourself for absolutely no reason, treating the door as if the locks reset every single night.
And this perfectly captures the nature of the defender described in the text. This is absolutely not some harsh judge just waiting to strike you down. When you fall, this defender doesn't abandon you. They actually come closer to lift you with patience. The text stresses that this figure values your sorrow over your mistakes, and your genuine desire to change far more than the errors themselves. Their primary role is to defend you against the accuser, actively drawing closer to you specifically when you stumble, rather than pulling away.
But what about the external stuff, the massive obstacles? Well, the text addresses these as giants. It says, giants loom over the entrance to be defeated, not to block the way. Now that is a crucial reframe. Those intimidating fears, the towering situations, the voices of enemies that make the gateway look totally unapproachable, the transcript clarifies that they don't actually shrink the door. The gateway stays exactly the size it was made. Those giants exist specifically to be defeated, proving that absolutely nothing standing against you is bigger than the one standing with you.
Now, let's talk about choosing the right door and knowing when to simply walk away from pain.
This is such a vital distinction, because not every open door is actually meant for you. The source contrasts the divine open door, which leads to pasture, peace, and abundant bread, with the toxic closed door. The open door is a place of freedom and genuine security where you can finally stop bracing yourself for impact. On the flip side, we have the closed doors. These are situations that humiliate you, places that cut your wings, and toxic cycles of pain that honestly just masquerade as loyalty. The transcript is very direct here. It actively urges the listener to bravely walk away from these toxic doors. It's saying, do not spend the rest of your life turning in a circle in front of an entrance that only leads back into the exact same room of captivity.
Finally, we arrive at the field of provision, looking at what lies just beyond the threshold.
So once you walk away from those toxic doors and finally cross that threshold of honesty, where do you actually end up? Well, the source uses some incredibly vivid imagery to describe it. It talks about a river of clear water that literally washes away the pain, the anger, and the frustration you totally forgot you were even holding on to. It speaks of a table where bread is abundant, signaling a definitive end to seasons of lack. And perhaps most importantly, it promises a steady peace that fills the entire home, like a tangible steadiness that your whole family can feel. It represents absolute spiritual relief, rest, and an overflowing provision that you don't earn at the threshold, but you simply receive once you're past it. So how do we sum all of this up? The transcript provides this ultimate, brilliant takeaway quote: "The door was never the problem. Your honest answer is the key." It's that simple. You don't have to force the lock, and you don't have to wait until you're spiritually flawless. You just have to step up to the threshold and provide your honest truth.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, pretty provocative question directly inspired by the text. To cross your own threshold, the source says you have to bring the thing under the thing. So ask yourself right now, what is the fear you haven't named yet? Take a second, drop all the rehearsed answers, and just find your honest voice. Because according to this text, the door is already open and the field is waiting for you.